Just hang in there. You look good.
Thank you.
Okay, well, hello everybody. I want to welcome you to this short interview. My name is Daniel Ranta, and I'm an adjunct or part-time professor in the Graduate Knowledge Management Program at Kent State. The class that I teach two classes. One is called Designing and Building or Implementing Knowledge Management in the Workplace, and the other is Communities of Practice. So right now I'm involved in a Community of Practice course, and what I've done is I've arranged a few interviews. Last week, I interviewed Stan Garfield, a famous community expert. And this week, we're going to go where I like to go, which is kind of in the trenches, talking directly with somebody who is in charge of a significant portion of the KM program for a large global company, and where the focus is definitely on communities of practice. And so I'd like to introduce you to today our guest, and that's Magdalena Pack. Magdalena, could you provide us with a quick introduction of your role with this large global company, et cetera? Thanks for being with us, by the way. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Daniel, and hello to all. My name is Magdalena. I work for a semiconductor company for about 15 years, and I'm managing since for 5 years now communities of specialists. So that's our platform where you can ask questions and get answers. So it's a Q&A platform. We have about 4,000 users in the community using daily. So we get about 1,000 questions a quarter to 1,500 questions. So it's a tremendous knowledge we're building, and people ask questions, share what they experience. And yeah, communities of specialists, they are there for around 10 years now. We have a SharePoint-based solution, and we are looking for kind of a something new technology, maybe easier to use. Yeah, and I'm the program manager for collaboration, and I'm in charge of the whole project community and specialist. And I'm working currently with Daniel to build the requirements, or to find our requirements for the company where the future will be.
Thank you, Magdalena. That's a great overview and a great start for this short interview. What would you say now? You've been in this role now for 8 or 9 years or more, so you're quite familiar with everything you're doing. Yeah.
Yeah. So prior, when I joined in 2008, I was a executive administrator, and I changed to a program manager around 5 years ago.
Okay. Fantastic. So like you said, we've been working together over the last about 3 months, and I have to tell you, I'm very impressed with the robust activity. You just mentioned the number of questions that are being asked, but I see all of the replies that are coming in too. So I like to call that collective elaboration, where people around the world who many times they've never even met, and maybe they never will meet each other face to face, they're helping people solve problems. And I know solving problems is a real centerpiece for your communities of specialists, or COSs, and I think that's a fantastic centerpiece for a community program. But is there anything else in terms of a business? I know you guys have this process around escalations, and you really don't want that to happen. So you kind of use communities to be kind of on the front lines and protecting yourselves to solve problems for customers sooner, so it doesn't get to that point. Can you explain a little bit about how those things link together?
Yeah. So that's called our knowledge management support workflow. It's basically a 3-step approach. The first one is that you leverage all the search tools we have. So whatever you get the answer or the information you need, you can search several tools. You can imagine we have a lot of tools. I'm sure other companies have a lot of tools where they get our information from. So that's the first step a user can do to kind of self-help. So that's the first step. And we always recommend to never skip the first step. So there, of course, not every question is easy to solve, but most of them everybody can answer themselves by looking for files, procedures, etc. And then if there's so if you have done the first step, the second step would be to ask communities of specialists. So if there is if you need support from experts, or if you have searched for it and you still could not find the answer, of course we always recommend, and you should never hesitate to ask the community. So we're speaking of 4K people around the world. They have a lot of knowledge. They work on all different type of tools. So we encourage them to ask. It's not, you are all human, you cannot know everything. So the second step would be to ask the community. And of course, we have measurements behind. We would like to provide answers in the fastest time you can, but it's not always possible, especially with people working around the globe. We have the time zone difference, but we are trying to give the answer latest within 5 days. So that's our approach. Of course, we are targeting to answer within 24 hours. And the third step, so if the community try to help you, and maybe you're working on something where you just gathered feedback from, so now you can proceed. Or if you get to the point, no, I'm reaching the point where I need more help. So that would be the third step, which is the escalation process. So you're escalating the problem or the service event, or maybe you need a design change. So it's not always something, let's say like the tool is down, for example. That's not always the case. So design changes could be also the reason for the third step, where you officially escalate the service event.
Okay, well, thank you for that great explanation. You know, in looking at all the components across the board that kind of really make communities run, there's a couple things that I've been very impressed with. Leadership, and by leadership, I mean I'm not talking about executive support and executive leadership as much as I'm talking about just senior people around the world, the people that you guys call your site owners, that are kind of those sponsors for the communities, and how much they care, how much professional pride they have, but other people also that I would call brokers, but I know you like to call in your discipline collaboration language advocates, basically the same thing. I really am impressed with the leadership that they want to follow through, and they want to be able to solve the problems. And the other element is trust, and how much, and you're kind of referring to it indirectly when you talk about how people are following this process, but trusting each other and demonstrating human vulnerability, being willing to ask questions, and knowing that you know, you're just looking for that answer for your customer, and that's the most important thing, so that it doesn't get to that kind of that level of escalation, et cetera. So those are two things that are not easy for a lot of companies. A lot of companies would love to have what you have in that sense, to be able to start as a foundation for, you know, great knowledge management or community program. What would you say are some of the things that are more challenging for your organization that you're working on, and where you want to, a couple of areas where you would want to see some improvement, et cetera, based on feedback you've gotten from people in communities, or just things that you've seen from other sources around?
Yeah, so every company starts small. So we have those one-on-one conversations, but you get to the point, you get bigger and bigger. You have to support several regions. So our company is reaching more than 10K people around the globe. So it's not even possible to have a one-on-one conversation and solve problems. So we are trying to share the knowledge. There's so many senior people out there. Of course, they retire, and their knowledge from the last day, it's basically gone. So our idea was to have a place where you can publish articles, share the knowledge, ask for experience, especially for, let's say, like older tools, where they, let's say, like you 20 years ago, documentation wasn't always that ideal. So we need those people writing it down or sharing with other engineers so they can build up the knowledge too. So we were trying to first, of course, to prevent an escalation. So we the ideal case would be that in the second step, using community of specialists, we will be able to solve the problem. So of course, it's all about money too, because the third step, the escalation process, that might include several people flying to the customer, getting new parts. So at the end of the day, that's also money that cost us the third step. So everything we can prevent in step 2 is good for us and good for the company. So the challenging part was definitely building up. So starting from scratch, building a knowledge base, writing it down, getting all the people involved. And of course, there were people, let's say, like they were not able to follow up anymore on one-on-one conversations. So it's getting more and more. So I'm sure everybody comes to that point and say like, okay, it definitely needs change. And by documenting everything and having the whole world involved, you kind of skip the part of, and also a failure, a one-on-one conversation. So there's not only one person in the world who knows the answer, there are maybe 10, 20, 100 over the years, building up that knowledge and writing it down from here to here.
You know, I love that explanation because as you're talking about, when you're smaller, you have the time and space, so to speak, to be able to do a one-on-one or talk to somebody, et cetera. But as things get bigger, you're looking to put things in a many-to-many paradigm where a lot of people and a lot of ideas can come in, because you never know kind of where the right answer is coming from. And, one of your key performance indicators with communities that you kind of referenced a little bit when you were talking before that, I'm really impressed with in terms of a sense of urgency is that you really kind of demand, it's not fair at all to say mandatory, but you just ask the people that are leading your communities to, in certain cases, especially when, it involves a customer solution that needs to take place, to get an answer within 24 hours. And I know that that has been really effective for you. It's not easy to do. How have you kind of managed that process to ensure that, these answers are coming in and things are, being collaborated on and being solved?
I agree. It's a challenge over the years, but we have those kind of we call them site owners. So they are managing the communities. So we have quarterly meetings with them, or if needed, monthly we meet. Of course, that was not from now and then. So that was a process over the years. First, to understand the principle of communities, and then, of course, the power they have. So the site owners, they have the power to build up their sites. And that was a manual process, meeting with them. And of course, it's important to the company. It's important for the people. And if you keep telling them that's important, and that has, if you list all the benefits of a community, the more you talk about it, the more people think, okay, it's very important. Maybe it's not at the beginning or not to each person, but for the whole community. And I'm sure everybody would benefit from using communities at least one time a year or so. I mean, imagine if you go online, search for any problem you're trying to solve, and even if it's just connecting to the internet, you are thankful that there is one person writing down that he experienced the same problem and how he solved it. So that's where we all need help, and I think that's the power of communities.
Yeah, that's great. I think a lot of organizations that I've talked to over the years face that same kind of challenge. So you have a lot of knowledge that's solving problems. And one of the things that I was also impressed with, I had an opportunity to interview a lot of the community site owners, and that they kind of go above and beyond, many of them, to spend the time to document the knowledge so that people can find it later on. And they're in that way, they're kind of carving out different techniques to retain the critical knowledge, and taking knowledge that a lot of times we talk about in a community as tacit or in people's heads, and they're making it explicit or available, and they're documenting. One individual, I was really impressed by him. It's like he had boundless energy. I like that phrase, but he was creating his own wiki articles and organizing knowledge, because he knew that the same questions would be coming back in. And so it's just a marvelous technique to be able to say, hey, we asked that question before, or hey, you may want to reference this, et cetera. So I know you referenced earlier that the knowledge can kind of, the little guy walking, can walk right out the door, because people come and go. And people will eventually retire and leave, and they can leave with most of the knowledge is in our head, so they can leave with that knowledge. So what are you thinking about in terms of retaining knowledge? And as you know, it's a challenge, and you face with certain senior people in the organization what I would call demographic challenges, et cetera, with them potentially retiring and walking out the door with that knowledge. What are you thinking about in terms of retaining knowledge?
I think it's the most important. So the guy who was writing wikis, he did that for a reason. So instead of replying or responding to people 10 times with the same answer, you see, okay, there are many people having the same question, so it's not a one question. So I take the step and write it down. So this guy was helping himself and other people by documenting. And I think that's what's critical to retain it, to write it down. I always say, if you do not document it's lost. So it's knowledge. If they retire, and of course you can call them, but I think that should be included in the processes and in everybody's responsibility to share. I think that's the first step we can do, and I think for long term there's no other way around it.
Yeah, that's great. You're one of the things I learned about your company is definitely there's a lot of barriers that global companies face in terms of sharing knowledge. You've got, three dimension would be, you got language barriers, you have, cultural barriers, and you have time zone barriers too. I know you're based in Europe, and, you're 9 time zones away from, headquarters, people that you have to talk to regularly, but a lot of time zones away from other people that you have to talk and meet with regularly. And then when it comes to language, a tricky question is, what's the most spoken language in the world? And the answer, of course, is English is a second or third language. I know you speak English as second language. Your English is superb, and congratulations on that. Fantastic. But the point is that around the world, how do you work within your communities to help overcome some of these challenges that as a company, that you're in so many countries, you speak so many different languages, you're spread around the globe, and you're trying to make communities work. And how do you what are some of the little tips and tricks that you use to make that work?
Thank you. First, so English is not my first language, so I apologize in the beginning. Maybe I was always a bit nervous. But yeah, to be honest, it's hard to express yourself in a second language. I struggle with that daily, and so does everybody else. I think so. Of course, over the years, you get used to it, you learn. It's the most challenge we have in communities. We have a lot of colleagues in Asia and in Europe, and of course, the language is English. So in the communities, we do speak English. We are glad that our company supports us with with how do you say language courses, so English courses. They teach us, but we have also of course Google Translate is also a very good help, but especially for Asian countries, they not only the language barrier, it's also the cultural barrier or the cultural differences that we have. So let's say like North America or Europe, they are more open to ask questions, and in some Asian regions, it's kind of I would not say embarrassing, but they hesitate and losing their face when they ask the question, because that means they don't know the answer. That's in Europe, for example, that's normal. I ask a lot, and I would really love to change that and encourage everybody, or give them the feeling that we are all human. So I would wish for that will change maybe in the next years or next decades. But what I also, if I have one wish, of course, translating is a big challenge. So a translation feature implementing to the community of specialists would definitely be a great help, especially for people who are not that professional in English. And for those people who need to constantly improve their English, they have colleagues who are maybe more professional and they help, or maybe they post a question for them, and I hope that they all get support from their managers to what level they are in English. They should just try and get used to it. It's a hard way.
Well, that's a great reply. I love the idea of a built-in translator. And one of the things that we did when I was at General Electric was we made a video question and a video reply capability, so that it's saying, this is of course it's my coffee cup, but I could say, especially in your business, because I could say, here's the problem we have over here, there's a crack in the part or whatever, and I can show it. So, and we allowed people to talk and record a video for up to 3 minutes when they were asking a question or they were replying. And it just became a really nice way to be able to build, trusted relationships and show and demonstrate. And a lot of times it overcame the part that I like to say that, how people show things and how people type things. And if the translator can make it better, it becomes a great equalizer, because telephonically, when I've worked with large global companies, getting people to talk to people synchronously, on a phone and that type of thing is really hard, like you were talking about things. Let me shift gears. I know one of the things that you're doing is you're constantly looking at your training materials and how you want to improve the training for the communities, and kind of what are your thoughts on that, and how have you seen it, being an important part of the program to get more and more participation and engagement?
In regards of training, I think the more often you hear things, the more you remember, and maybe, or for sure, if you practice it, you will incorporate the knowledge in your daily job. So training is important, and I think
you try to get I know you hired like 2,000 young engineers last year. Are you trying to train them with the community process, early on, or how are you kind of trying to manage that? I know it's a big challenge for you as one person.
Yeah, we have our knowledge management new hire training, for example. So we have the challenge to train everybody within the first 90 days with the company. And of course, everybody knows that if you join a new company in the first 2 to 3 weeks, I would imagine you learn so many things, you hear so many things which you cannot really not yet relate to your daily job. So that's why we thought to improve that, and that people may more remember and integrate the knowledge into their new job role. we give them 90 days, so they are not required to do every training in the first weeks because you're so overwhelmed with the information. So we have the ability to, of course, you can always get back to the training if you have something in your memory. Hey, I heard something about communities of specialists. You go back and do the training again. Of course, you can do that anytime. But what we are trying to do is to do the most important trainings in the first weeks, and then you start your job, and then every tool you need by performing your job you do afterwards. So to me, at least to me, it gives that feeling, okay, I don't have to do everything in the first 2 weeks. I don't have to listen to any training. I can work there. I can ask my manager, and he can recommend, oh, you focus on this training first. And yeah, that's our approach, to give people 90 days to perform their training or complete their training.
I thought your training was excellent. You call it WBT, or web-based training. A lot of other companies call it computer-based training, or CBT. I took the training course that you shared with me when I first started, and I thought it was a great overview of the program, and I really appreciated it. So as we close out the interview, thinking of the students in this course, many of them already are working in some kind of a knowledge management role, but I think it's always interesting for them to see what are other knowledge management roles. So could you just highlight some of the roles that you guys have on your team that kind of runs your overall community and knowledge management program for us?
Yeah, we have in each region, we have several people who are so-called knowledge management champions. So they also teach classes on site in their, if required, in their language, and you can kind of have a one-on-one conversation, or while you're attending an instructor-led class, you can, of course, get more knowledge from this KM champion person than in a WBT.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. So, but you have some other people that kind of help you out with communications activity and those kind of roles there at your where you're currently located as well, helping knowledge management. And
they create training. They are kind of experts in creating the slides and doing the voiceovers, and we are trying to release a newsletter every quarter. So not only train the new hires, also our existing knowledge management experts, or all these people, we always teach them maybe new things. So what's new, or have you ever heard? So we are trying to speak to all the people if there's anything new in that newsletter, and we're releasing refreshing training every year.
Magdalena, this has been a great interview, and I really appreciate you taking the time to have this conversation. I think the students are really going to enjoy the different details that you provided about your role and about what you're doing on a daily basis in supporting your communities around the world. And I really, really appreciate you taking the time. With that, I'd just like to reach out and thank you for doing that. And I know the students are going to be appreciative also.
Thank you.